from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on AgDay, a State of the Union and the opioid epidemic. What does it mean for rural America? An agribusiness searching for a 2018 acreage mix.
91, 9.5 as far as soybeans go. Yeah, I would probably buy into that fairly quickly.
Avocados are gearing up for the Super Bowl, and USDA honors a wildfire hero from California.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths. Following the President's State of the Union address, his executive team is now charged with implementing some of the policies and proposals that the President is calling for in that speech. The address is a highlight reel to showcase accomplishments of the administration, but it also sets the agenda for the year ahead. In this case, the agenda includes immigration reform, infrastructure improvements, and trade policy. All three of those are important matters in farm country. But another concern for rural America and the country in general is the growing opioid epidemic. Several invited guests to last night's speech are on the front lines of this battle. The President has declared it a national emergency. Taking point for the administration will be new Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. Azar was sworn in on Monday. The HHS Secretary is a former drug company executive, and Azar says confronting the opioid addiction epidemic is one of his top priorities. And the need to act quickly is especially evident in rural America. Last fall, the Centers for Disease Control issued new data which shows the rates of drug overdose deaths in rural areas are rising and have surpassed their urban counterparts. In 1999, drug overdose death rates for urban areas were 6.4 per 100,000 people. In farm country, it was 4 people per 100,000. And in 2004, the rates converged, meaning they were equal. By 2015, the most recent year for analysis, the rural rate hit 17 deaths per 100,000. That tops the urban rate of 16.2. The epidemic is not lost on America's farm groups. American Farm Bureau President Zippy Duvall calling it a plague during the American Farm Bureau Convention just 3 weeks ago. A special breakout session was held to discuss the problem. The panel included Duvall and Roger Johnson from the National Farmers Union. Now, those organizations rarely agree on farm policy, but on this topic, they are in agreement. The groups jointly sponsoring a survey which shows the problem is even worse for farmers than rural America in general.
For 3 out of 4 farmers, farm workers, folks who are directly involved in production agriculture, to know someone personally, to have someone in their family or to be personally impacted themselves is really an astounding statistic.
This is about people and families' lives being destroyed, and the lack of knowledge that people have about what it's doing to our families, where do you get help.
The group say it's important for farm groups to start the conversation, raise awareness, and provide resources. Also on the panel was USDA's Ann Haslett. She's the assistant to the Secretary on Rural Development. She's been put in charge of USDA's response to the opioid epidemic. In 2016, nearly 50 people in the U.S. died each day of overdoses involving prescription opioids. Ohio is one of the hardest hit states. Now, Ohio is stepping up to find new ways to attack the problem with technology and innovative thinking. In this report provided by an Ohio task force called Ohio Third Frontier, Barb Consiglio looks at some of the best ideas.
Kelly Cashin has seen the devastation caused by opioids in her own backyard, and as a researcher at the University of Dayton, she's using technology to do something about it. Cashin and her team are developing a neurofeedback program that examines brain activity to help people recovering from addiction.
You monitor brain activity, and then you show the user or the patient what's happening in a specific portion of their brain and ask them to either amplify that activity or regulate that activity.
It's innovative solutions like Cashin's that Ohio was looking for. The state left no stone unturned to find new ways to approach the opioid issue.
We think that a great idea can come from anywhere, and we wanted to be able to put together a process and an opportunity for people to be able to bring their solutions to us to be evaluated.
Hundreds of ideas poured in from average citizens, scientists, and healthcare providers around the world. Top solutions range from an addiction assessment app that would identify patients who are at higher risk for opioid abuse to an augmented reality system that helps patients rehab from injury without pain medication.
You want to keep your hands straight.
Other top ideas include a mindfulness-based smoking cessation therapy that's adapted for opioid addiction and a virtual reality program to prevent addiction in teens and young adults, all with the goal of these ideas growing and helping the people, families, and communities affected by opioid abuse.
I think there's every reason to be optimistic that we're going to be turning this around over the next several years.
It's affecting people's lives, real people's lives, families, children, parents. And Ohio is trying to be at the forefront to really save lives.
In Columbus, Ohio, this is Barb Consiglio reporting.
The next phase of the Opioid Technology Challenge will call on the worldwide business and innovation community to advance technical solutions for the opioid crisis. For more information on the challenge, you can go to opioidtechchallenge.com. The president boasting about the economy during his State of the Union address, the strength of the economy showing up on Wall Street, with the Dow breaking through that 26,000 mark earlier this month. The momentum supported by the administration's fiscal policy and his recent tax overhaul. Its tax reform proving to be a mixed bag for farmers. While the corporate tax rate has been good for big businesses, Farm CPA Paul Neiffer says it's mixed for farmers.
They were created to take advantage of the first $50,000 of taxable income for a corporation be taxed at 15%. So the new corporate tax rate is a flat 21%. So those farmers are facing a 40% tax increase.
Neiffer suggests producers sit down with their tax advisors to weigh their options, including the possibility of moving to an S corporation from a C corporation. Neiffer says there could also be negative implications for certain feed yards under the new tax code.
Those larger volume feedlot operations where their income is above $25 million, right now they could deduct 100% of their interest. This new tax bill says that they can't deduct the interest, or they can only deduct to the extent of 30% of their adjusted income.
Feedlot operators and cattle producers are in Phoenix this week for the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA trade show. It follows last week's Cattle on Feed report showing inventories rising about 8%. The industry also expecting to see a boost in national herd numbers later this week when USDA releases its cattle inventory report. Now, pre-report estimates expect year-over-year growth of 1.3%, which would be slower than last year, but analysts say they're still expecting the largest January herd since 2008. Our own Betsy Gibbon is in Phoenix this week, and we'll have coverage tomorrow on AgDay. Mike Hoffman is back in the saddle again today and joins us with today's crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. It was beautiful weather at Road Farms in Delphos, Ohio this past weekend. Sam sent us this picture on Facebook. The two girls are sisters, Kaylee and Olivia, ages 3 and 2. She says they approve of the weather as they help out on the family farm, and who wouldn't with all that sunshine? However, snow is back in the forecast for this weekend. And taking a look at the wind speed forecast, it starts off windy today across the lower Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, stretching back into the Plain States as we head through the afternoon. You can see that goes into the eastern Great Lakes. Another storm system coming into the northern plains with a little bit of wind late today, and that will translate into the upper Mississippi Valley and the Great Lakes as we head through the day tomorrow. So a little bit windy through farm country over the next 24 hours. We'll talk more about your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
We're talking acreage intentions coming up next in our market analysis segment, and later, a U.S. Forest Service firefighter is honored for his heroics during the blaze this fall. The Bayer-Monsanto merger continues to face stiff evaluation in Europe. The EU's antitrust investigators pushing back their investigation timeline, giving Bayer more room to offer concessions to EU regulators. Now, concessions can mean additional asset sales. Bayer has already agreed to sell assets to other businesses, including BASF. Leadership at Bayer say the EU process is, quote, going to unimaginable depths. They've already submitted more than 4 million pages of documents to investigators. In agribusiness, the wheat market has grabbed the spotlight this week. Let's check in with Standard Grain's Joe Vaklovic from the floor of the CME to find out why.
The wheat market was sharply higher here on Tuesday. We have a developing drought in the U.S. along the southern plains and also into the northern plains. USDA had some crop progress numbers out or conditions numbers out yesterday for some of the major wheat growing states, and they were down substantially since they were last reported at the end of December. So we've got a little bit of a weather scare on our hands here, certainly, and it has helped to prop up prices. Moving forward here, you know, we got to keep an eye on the weather, but the weak U.S. dollar is something that is also been a positive factor for commodity markets, and that may be adding fuel to the fire here. You know, the weather is the biggest issue, but the weak dollar certainly helps. Live cattle market traded both sides of unchanged here on Tuesday, kind of an indecisive type trade. We did have an early cash trade this week. We traded cash cattle at 126, so an early week trade, which is impressive and hopefully it bodes well for what's going to happen later in the week. But that's on par to maybe off slightly from the highs that we saw in the cash market last week. Remember, on Friday after the close, we saw a very strong cash trade at that 126 or 127 level. So we're kind of holding tight here, but the futures market just kind of sideways. Again, Joe Vaklovic, the CME Group here in Chicago.
Soybeans seeing some positive gains on South American weather issues. So what could this mean for the acreage mix here at home? Ty Morgan asked a question from the road.
Here now with Matt Bennett of Bennett Consulting. Matt, we're on this acreage debate. I mean, we'll get a first taste of it in March, but I'm hearing some wild numbers being thrown out for soybeans. At this point, what are you thinking?
Right. I mean, some of the experts have said up to 2 million acres more beans than corn. You know, I don't know that I would go quite that far yet. You know, 91, 9.5 as far as soybeans go. Yeah, I would probably buy into that fairly quickly. I think whenever you look at the economics of it, you get outside of heavy livestock areas or areas where there's a lot of ethanol plants, you've got to understand that producers are actually raising good enough soybean yields with the kind of prices we've seen that it's pretty tough to discount, especially discount the ratio from beans to corn. You know, so we've been running around 2.6 to 1, even with a nice little corn rally we've seen in the last few days, still 2.6 to 1. That's not factoring in fall basis. So in areas where you have a similar fall basis for corn and for soybeans, that ratio gets up to like 2.75 to 1. A producer can't really discount that, especially whenever money's tight.
But we talk about this every year, and no matter what, we know producers love to plant corn. There's an appeal about corn. You look at rotation, you look at those corn on corn acres. I mean, how does that come into play? Do you really think that we can get north of 91.5 million acres?
A couple of years ago, people didn't think we could get to 80 million acres. A couple, 3 years ago, you get to 80, you get to 83, and then all of a sudden you're around 90 million acres.
Yeah, right.
And now we're talking 91.5. I think that it can happen. More producers are openly talking about the fact that they might plant soybeans on soybeans, and that would have been sacrilegious a few years ago for people to say that. And so it's something that could happen. I think that it will happen in areas, and I do think you're going to have a lot of bean acres.
But in reality, if we do have 91.5 or north of soybean acres, what impact is that ultimately going to have on price, you know, when we look at the picture?
Right. Well, we've thrown a lot of supply at these markets, both on a world and U.S. basis, and we continue to have pretty decent soybean prices. So a producer that is worried about that, as I would be worried about, I need to at least lock stuff in, because bottom line is this bean market could take a tumble if we continue to have record yields.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Let's take a quick break, and then we have much more on Ag Day when we come back.
For advice on the best way to be profitable on your farm, contact Matt at 217-273-1133.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman in looking at the root zone moisture map. And if we kind of look at the southwest and the western U.S., you can see where it's really starting to dry out.
Yeah, you had mentioned for winter wheat, kind of a concern southern plains, and California is concerned as they head toward the growing season as well, being a little bit dry. And you can also see some wet areas across the country, the upper Great Lakes, Nebraska, northern plains. Even though they're in a drought area, the root zone moisture, more or less the top 5 feet of the soil is on the wet side across parts of the Dakotas back into Montana. Also Florida and parts of the Gulf Coast a little bit on the wet side as well. Let's check out the weather maps, and not a lot going on today, but we do have 2 cold fronts, 2 storm systems moving through the northern tier of states. As you can see there, the first cold front isn't the real strong Arctic air, but the second one is. It's another shot of Arctic air similar to what we were seeing earlier in the winter. A little bit of snow through the Great Lakes with this first system, high pressure dominating the southeast. Another storm system perched offshore of the west coast. Now, because of the ridge popping up into the western states, we're going to see a lot of this move into the Pacific Northwest, not California, and farther southward the way it looks. Heading through tonight and into the day tomorrow, the Arctic front down towards Chicago. A little bit of snow with that Arctic front as well. Nothing real heavy there. Back into parts of Colorado and Wyoming with a little bit of upslope snow there. Checking out later in the day tomorrow, you can see the storm system coming into northwest of Seattle. So we're looking at some rain and mountain snow. Secondary cold front, Arctic front, almost catching up with the first one there as it moves toward the Appalachians. And fair amount of rain, it looks like, at least with that first front into the central Appalachians, southern Appalachians. There's the precipitation estimate past 24 hours. Most of it, obviously, northern states, adding in the next 36. A lot of it's still going to stay in the north, but then we do get that moisture suddenly developing along that first cold front into parts of Kentucky and the Tennessee Valley. A little bit of moisture, central Rockies as well. Most of that will fall in the form of snow. There's the past 24 hours, the next 36. A lot of the snow stays across the Great Lakes and from areas in Pennsylvania northward and also Colorado northward in the Rockies. Checking out temperatures, hey, we have some 70s in Texas today, but there's that colder air coming into the northern plains. You can see by tonight below 0 in parts of North Dakota, still 50s in the southeast. Highs tomorrow afternoon, single digits in that Arctic air, but still pretty mild along the Gulf Coast. There's the jet stream, and you can see that first shot of cold air kind of relaxes a little bit. Secondary shot coming over the weekend. This is a lot of Arctic air going to be pouring into the northern states over the next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We head to Cheyenne, Wyoming. First of all, mostly cloudy and chillier, high of 43 degrees. Greenville, or Mississippi, I should say, good deal of sunshine and breezy, high 61. And Hartford, Connecticut, a mixture of sunshine and clouds, high around 34.
All right, up next, the Packer TV will look at the impact of the Super Bowl on avocado sales. And later, the White House honors the hero firefighter from the U.S. Forest Service.
AgDay, brought to you by new Delaro fungicide for corn and soybeans. Achieve personal best yields.
On the Packer TV, the Food and Drug Administration and the USDA are making a fresh pledge to work together. The two agencies signing a formal agreement promising enhanced collaboration and cooperation on produce safety and food recalls. New recall guidelines are currently in a public comment period until March 20th. Now, this agreement also calling for streamlining regulatory responsibilities and allowing the agencies to identify ways to reduce inspection inefficiencies. They'll also work to develop regulatory approaches to biotechnology. This weekend, you can expect another big splash from the avocado folks. Avocados from Mexico again participating in the Super Bowl. The group revealing Chris Elliott playing a cheesy sales rep of a perfect world full of avocados. Now, Avocados from Mexico aired its first Super Bowl ad back in 2015. According to the California Avocado Commission, some 140 million pounds of avocados will be consumed during the Super Bowl, mostly in the form of guacamole. And speaking of avocados, far Texas-based Velita Avocado plans to plant new trees in the Lone Star State. They say within 5 years, they'll be selling Haas greenskin hybrid varieties grown under shade from South Texas. All right, still to come, the heroics of one firefighter credited with saving the lives of more than 60 people. That story next.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit Kubota.com today.
One of the honored guests at the State of the Union address last night was a USDA employee who's credited with saving the lives of dozens of adults and children who were at a ranch camp outside of Los Angeles. David Dahlberg works as a fire prevention technician for the U.S. Forest Service. He's based at a ranger's office in Santa Barbara County, which felt the brunt of those wildfires last year. Now, Dahlberg is credited with saving 62 children and staff members from a raging wildfire that had encircled the camp. The firefighter met with Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue, who praised Dahlberg's quick action. USDA said David single-handedly worked to fireproof the camp and keep its inhabitants safe until they could all be rescued. He credits his training in preparation.
me with 14 years of experience, which is not that much, but enough to know when it's safe to keep moving or when I should turn around and go back. And to this day, I still don't know exactly how I got all the way out there, but I do believe it was all because of my training.
Secretary Perdue says David's heroic actions in the face of grave danger displayed exceptional character, selflessness, and sound judgment. Incredible. What a great story. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Start your day with us. For Mike Hoffman and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest lasting heavy-duty pickups.